The Beatles have released multiple albums that are often ranked among the greatest of all time. We all know about the colorful Sgt. Pepper's, the amazingly produced Abbey Road, and the psychedelic gem Revolver. But it's undeniable that the most interesting release by the band came in the form of their self-titled 1968 masterpiece, the White Album. One of their best-selling records, selling more than 24 million copies, and one that features some of the most bold and risky compositions by the band. And still you have lots of people complaining.
And now your hosts for this evening, the Rolling Stones.
I wasn't even gonna make a video about this. I don't think there's enough content in this sort of comments to make a video, but I saw so many of these comments that I had to talk to you guys about it. I was doing some research on Paul McCartney because I'm planning to make a video ranking his entire discography, and while I was doing that research, I found a lot of people criticizing his work on the White Album and calling the whole album a mess, with a lot of filler, claiming that the only reason why people like that album is because it was released by the Beatles right after Sgt. Pepper's, Magical Mystery Tour, and Revolver. The comments had a lot of replies, and I was so excited. I was like, it's probably people fucking grilling the dude, destroying this guy, but no, people were actually agreeing with him. And given the fact that I've said multiple times in this channel that the White Album is my favorite piece of art ever made, I had to come on here and defend the album, because in my opinion, anyone who believes that the White Album has too much filler, too many songs, or that is a mess of an album, too many genres, simply doesn't understand what the album is about. Now, please don't get me wrong, I do understand why someone would say the White Album is way too long. I mean, after Sgt. Pepper's being 39 minutes long, Revolver being around the same length, and Magical Mystery Tour being, I think, 41, 42 minutes long, I can definitely see how an hour and 30 minutes of an album can be a little too much. Like, I get it, but that doesn't mean the album is too long. The whole point of the White Album was for it to be that long, so it can include every single piece of music the band wanted to release.
I've got so many songs that I've got, my quota of tunes for the next 10 years or albums. I'd just like to maybe do an album of songs.
George Harrison wanted more songs. Paul McCartney had a lot of music ready by 1968. Actually, some of the cuts didn't even make the album, like Junk and Teddy Boy, that were, written around 1968. John Lennon had a lot of different genres he wanted to play around with in songs like Everybody's Got Something to Hide Except for Me and My Monkey, Your Blues, Julia. In other words, by 1968, John Lennon, Paul McCartney, and George Harrison had grown too much. They wanted to do too many things, and a 42-minute album wasn't gonna cut it. This is also the beginning of the end for the Beatles. There's multiple songs in this album where Paul McCartney doesn't even need the rest of the band, like Blackbird, Mother Nature's Son. The same thing happens to John Lennon in songs like Julia, while My Guitar Gently Weeps features guitar playing by Eric Clapton, which is one of the first times that another musician, a well-known musician, was invited to a Beatles recording. There's just multiple things about the recordings of the White Album that make it seem like this wasn't even a band making a record. It was just individual songwriters receiving help from each other and then releasing their solo songs under the name of the Beatles. I actually have a video about that in the channel if you want to check that out. So it's not that the album features too many songs just because, it's that it had to feature that many, because if it was only 14, 15, or 16 like it usually was, the Beatles would have probably broken up in 1968.
Because it would be nice to mainly to get them all out the way. Oh yeah, but I mean, it'd be nice to, if any of us can do separate things as well. But that way, it also preserves the Beatle bit of it.
But let's just say for a moment, hypothetically, that I agree with you, and I do believe the White Album has too many songs. Which songs are we going to take off the album? Because if you were to ask me, if you're going to come to me for advice, I would have no clue. In my opinion, every single song on this album is key for the way the album feels. Obviously, I have my favorites, While My Guitar Gently Weeps, Honey Pie, Long Long Long, Julia, Dear Prudence, and obviously I have some songs that I don't like as much, like Birthday, like Revolution Number 1, like Savoy Truffle, but that doesn't mean I want the songs to be left off the album, and that doesn't mean I can make a whole disc out of the songs that I like the most. Maybe we can all agree that we don't really need the avant-garde mess that Revolution Number 9 is, and we don't really need the Wild Honey Pie instrumental either. We can live without those tracks, but you still have 28 songs left and an hour and 30 minutes of runtime, so the album has to be that long. Part of the magic magic of the White Album is all the variety of sounds that the album offers, and for it to happen, you need a large track list. You just need it. And that leads me to my next point, which is people arguing that the album has too many genres, is not cohesive at all, that it's basically a mess. Now, you listen. I do agree that some of the songs in this album feel a little too disconnected from each other, especially when you compare it to some of the other releases by the band, like Rubber Soul, Revolver, and Sgt. Pepper's, the foundations of the concept album. But I disagree with the idea that that makes the album bad, or that the album being a mess is a negative thing. You see, when I heard this album for the first time, I was maybe 13, 14. My dad saw that I was really enjoying the Hey Jude music video that's posted on YouTube, so he decided to buy me a copy of the White Album because it was also released in 1968. And when I heard this album for the first time, I can't tell you how much of an epiphany I have. I've said it multiple times in this channel, the amount of sounds, songwriting styles, voices, instrumentation blew my mind. I knew what I wanted to do with my life then. I wanted to talk about music, and I wanted to talk about the feeling that this album made me feel. I was kind of transported to a different reality, a realm of reality where creativity was God, and that feeling comes back every time I listen to this album. So taking away the thing that made the album so special to me seems like a crazy idea. It sounds nuts. Why would I take the variety away from the White Album when that's literally the thing that makes the album so entertaining and iconic to me? Can you imagine a version of the White Album without Martha My Dear, without Savoy Truffle, without Revolution Number 1, without Peggy's? I personally couldn't. Like, the magic of this album is that you don't know what's coming next. You're going to be hit with a different genre. It's going to go from 0 to 100 really quick. And listen, once again, I totally agree with you. The transition from Your Blues to Mother Nature's Sun and Helter Skelter to Long 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 is ridiculous. It completely knocks you off the intensity of the previous song, but that doesn't mean it's bad. The emotional variety of this album is part of the reason why it's so magical. So, even though I'm willing to accept that I like some parts of this album more than others, even though I'm willing to accept that this album is way longer than any of the other releases by the Beatles, and even though I'm willing to accept that this album is a mess of a lot of different genres, that does not mean that this album is overrated. This is in fact one of the greatest albums of all time. It deserves to be one of the best-selling albums ever, and in my opinion, is the greatest piece of art ever made. And if you disagree, you're the problem.
I'm not a great one for that. Maybe it was too many of that. Look, what do you mean? It was great. It sold. It's the bloody Beatles White Album. Shut up.
Now, of course, part of the reasons why I make these videos is because I want to hear your opinion, so go ahead and leave it down below. Do you think the White Album is overrated? Do you think the album has too much filler? Do you think the album is way too long? I always try my best to read the comments and reply to them as soon as possible, so you don't feel like you're wasting your time, so go ahead and let me know what you think. I really do hope you guys enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it. If you did, go ahead and leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the videos that I upload. If you want me to talk about any other topics related to music, if you want me to check out an album, a song, or an artist, leave it down below as well, and I'll make sure to read it and fulfill your requests as soon as I can. Once again, I hope that you enjoyed, and I hope that I can see you soon with a new video. But until then, bye.